It's okay.
Now, will I know if people are coming in?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay, that looks good. Yeah,
All right.
I can start.
Should be recording.
Okay.
I think she said it was recorded.
She said she was going to, yeah.
And you double check it. So
Good. So I can start anytime.
I guess you can.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm not leaving until.
Okay. Okay, we're going to start the painting. Hi, Audrey. You there, Audrey? Are you there, Audrey?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Looks like you got a private lesson today.
Oh, well, even better.
You have your mill picture all taped down, all ready to go?
Yes, I do.
Okay. First thing we're going to do is the background trees, all that brown, grayish brown area around the building. So the colors we're going to use, you want to get ready. Some burnt umber, or you might have Van Dyke brown instead, either one, with a little Payne's gray in it. So mix up onto your palette in a little puddle some burnt umber and Payne's gray. Still make a little puddle of the two mixed together.
Okay.
And I put mine.
It should be very light.
A medium tone will be good. I can't find my Payne's gray. Okay, there we go. A medium tone, not too dark because you have to put a lot of other trees over it, and they need to be a little darker than this first wash. So after you get your little puddle of the color mixed, just leave it for a minute and go back in with your wet, just to wet the paper. So just with clean water, wet everything here above. Can you see the picture okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Up above the snowbank here. Mine has a little tint to it, but that's fine. And don't wet the building, go around the building, especially because there's some snow on the roof. So you don't want to get any of this tree color. I'll just wet this all pretty liberally. Don't stroke it too many times because it'll dry it out.
Okay.
So just liberally put on some clean water. All over the back, over around the top of the building. You can go over the tree that's on the left because
Okay.
that's going to be darker. So I'm going to go right over that tree and then right over to the edge of the to the tape. And very carefully again around the other side of the building, being careful not to wet the building. So we get all this wet on the top. Okay,
Looks good.
all right. Then you're going to take your color that you've mixed up, your gray and your brown mixture. And we're going to paint that in. It's a little more brown than it is gray. It has more brown in it.
Okay, I think mine looks a little more gray. All right, I'll get a little more brown in
Yeah,
there.
either way, it's you know, it's kind of up to you. Whatever you think looks like a good tree woods color. So I'm going to put in this color and I'm kind of just doing some vertical strokes. I'm not being careful to keep it even. It can be light in some places and darker in other places. Kind of tricky around the roof here. Right up to the top edge. Drop that color in. And like I said, you can go right over that tree.
Okay, do I have too much water on my paper if it's making like that bleeding kind of look?
You getting like blossomy
Yeah,
look. Yeah, you might have a little too much paper. You might want to take, is it taped to a board?
yeah. So can I just
Tape-
blot it with a paper towel?
Yeah, but that might take off too much water. After you blot with a paper towel, go back over it to even out the wetness.
Okay,
Make sure it's wet enough. You might have to, it might take a little too much out. You can tilt your board and let it run off the edge too. Okay. So we got just a wash of that color in a fairly, you can see mine's fairly light. There are a couple of spots where it's a little bit darker, but that's all right. We're putting a lot of trees on top of this. So we need to have room to grow into deeper values that will show up on top. So you don't want this background to be too dark.
okay.
Let me know when you're ready.
But I'm supposed to be doing it like in strokes with a smaller brush because that's what's taking so long.
Oh, I have a pretty good size round brush, like a number 10, but a big flat brush will work.
Okay,
Your big flat one that you got in the kit.
okay, good.
Yeah,
'Cause
you
I'm
want
like,
to
this is
kind of
gonna
get
take
it
forever.
wet. Get it wet the quickest way you can, yeah.
Okay. I think you'd say it looks okay.
Okay, good. Now we can't do anything on that area yet because it'll run together. So we're gonna skip down and do some of the really, if you're looking at your color reference, the very darkest color you see is still these two colors, the brown and the Payne's gray, but more Payne's gray this time.
Okay.
In fact, a lot more Payne's gray. And you want to switch to a smaller brush because we're going to be painting in between that lattice work that's right to the left of the wheel.
Uh-huh.
You see all that crisscross?
Yes.
we're gonna be putting in a really dark color in between all those crisscross. I'm gonna leave them white, they're outlined, right? You can see,
Right.
can you see? Yeah, so the spaces in between all those crisscross spots, we're gonna fill in with this same dark, but this time
Okay.
we
And
have
I
more,
did that and it looks more blackish,
yes.
like a
so
blacker tone. Okay.
more Payne's gray in that mix.
Okay.
It's this is the darkest part of the whole picture.
Okay.
So you're just gonna come in and paint in a little, it's gonna take a little bit of time, don't rush, because it's kind of tedious getting in, but painting in those little triangular shapes and below. Everything except the boards that are crossing over each other. You're leaving those white for right now.
Okay.
So if you'll want to be looking at your color print to this first one, the one that I'm doing right now, carries down dark in between those two stone wall, like
Yeah.
right in between those two stone wall in the light yellow. That it does go dark right down in between those two.
Okay.
So it's going to take a little bit of time. To just take your time getting into the little spaces, and you can paint that direct. You don't have to wet the paper first. Such small spaces, it's just easier to just paint it right on the dry paper. That's usually how I decide whether I wet the paper first and drop in color or whether I paint directly on the paper. It depends on how big of a space. If I want to fill in a large space, I usually wet the paper first.
Okay.
And a small space, I would just paint right on the dry paper. So just leaving those little crisscross things white and filling in. This is called negative painting. When you're painting the spaces around something, not the actual object itself, but the spacing around it. You'll hear the negative painting. That's what that means. Negative space is everything around an object and not the actual object itself. Hand's a little shaky here. I'm making a mess. Okay. Take your time and then just let me know when you're ready for the next step. Use the most comfortable, small brush that you have.
Daddy.
Okay. I'm done.
Okay,
Yeah.
you beat me.
Oh,
When you get
I
down to
wasn't looking up.
oh, no, I wasn't either. When you get down to the end, you're going to be cropping your paper off at the on the last little lattice. So just sort of fade it out there on the side, on the very far left side.
Okay.
Okay, another place where it's very dark is inside the wheel. all those triangular spaces that are in between the spokes.
Uh-huh.
Same
Would be
thing,
the same color. Okay.
same color, yep, dark, really dark. And we're doing the same thing. Paint them in on dry paper, leave the spokes white, and paint the little pie-shaped triangles in between the spokes. Okay. There is a tall stick like on the left. You want to avoid that too. You see how that goes down in front?
Yes.
You don't want to paint that either. You just want to paint on either side of that. That attaches to the axle, I guess, or something. I don't know. Don't know too much about water wheels.
I love this painting.
Oh, good. I'm glad. That's good for me to hear because I stress out trying to find good pictures.
Well,
Trying to
I was going on a car ride and we were driving through Townsend, through Pepperell, 119.
Yeah.
And I was staring at all the trees thinking about how it would look in this picture.
Yeah.
Okay, that looks good.
Good. Now, are you ready or?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we have two little rocks in the snow in front of, just about in front of the wheel.
Uh-huh.
The two rocks have snow on top of them. Can you see how how the shapes go? So you want to paint this dark color underneath the snow line that's on there. And you can leave a little fleck of white paper actually in the dark area too for like a little variation. But on that back one, you just want to paint under the snow mound. And then on the other one, the same thing, leave the snow. It's a little bit to the right side, and then it's dark underneath the snow on that rock. I mean, it's okay to leave a little fleck of paper within the dark area. You don't have to fill it in all solid.
Okay. Okay. This is where I need to learn the balance of, I don't want dark pencil marks, but you have to be able to see what you're doing.
Yes, yeah, it takes a little bit of getting used to. You have to see it, but
Yeah.
sometimes if you have transferred it and you feel like it came out too dark, you can take one of those kneaded erasers. Do you know what those are? The gray, soft, like they're like
Yes, you had to teach me that in class.
yeah,
I
like
do remember
silly
that.
putty.
Yes.
Yeah, and you just take that and press down and lift off some of the lead
Okay.
if you need to lighten it before you paint. But
I think my
especially
rocks
if-
look okay.
especially if it's flowers or something with light colors, you might want to lighten up your pencil markings before you paint.
Okay.
Okay, one more really dark spot is under the mound of snow on the far right-hand side of the paper. Well, for you, it's probably the left, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, under that mound of snow that's under the evergreen tree, that's really dark as well. That is a little more brown than the last two that we did. So you might want to add a little more brown to the mix. And that's like a rock under the snow. So you just want to paint that in. It doesn't have to be completely even color. It can be a little lighter in some spot. You don't have to worry about getting it totally evenly placed. It is, sometimes it's even more interesting when you have a little light and dark. So that just gets directly painted in and kind of separates the snow.
Okay.
Okay. All right, now, let me see here. What color? Let's do the evergreen tree. A lot of people shy away from these trees and they think they're really hard to do, which they do take a little bit of a technique that you'll get used to. Hopefully our background is dry enough. So this one is done on dry paper. Sometimes I do those evergreen trees on wet paper, but this one is done on dry paper. This is, I don't know if you have sap green or hooker's green. You
I
might
have both.
Oh, you do? Good.
I do.
Okay, hooker's green.
Okay.
With a little bit of ultramarine blue in it to darken it a little more. And you want a kind of a small brush to do this. Hooker's green is a little blue anyway, so it won't take too much ultramarine to darken it. You have ultramarine blue?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so on your palette, mix up the hooker's green with a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. This tree can be anywhere in the space that's left between the building and the edge of the paper. In the original, I spaced it away from the building a little bit more, but when I did the class, I put it a little closer to the building.
Okay.
Actually, at the bottom of it touches the building. So I'm going to do that. I think it's a little better balance than what your your reference shows.
Okay.
It's a little taller than the flat roof of the building. What I do is give myself a guideline, which is the trunk of the tree. So with a really small brush, I will come in here to establish my height, which is about a ½ inch above the roof. And I just give myself a little broken line, which indicates the trunk of the tree. Does that show up okay?
Yep.
Okay. And then it's a little bit of a technique to get the branches to look, you know, spiky, like evergreens. Up at the top, I take a little crisscross, make a little, like a little X, and add a couple little lines to that X. Now the important part is that the branches come further away from the trunk, the center, as you go down to the bottom of the tree. So up at the top, they're not gonna come as far away from the trunk. As you go down the tree, they're coming out a little further away. So it gives it a triangular look. Okay. So, and it's important to leave spaces between the outside edges of the branches, the ends of the branches. From one to the next, you want to leave a little space. So as you're coming down, you're going to work back and forth from one side to the other. take your really small brush and give yourself a little rough curve with like maybe 3 little strokes, and curve the branch. This is the beginning of the branch. Curve it downwards a little bit. The 3 quick little press and lift strokes. And then on top of that little curve that you've made, just add near the middle, near the trunk, or actually on the trunk, add a couple more little short curved strokes, and maybe one near the end. So building upon that curve that you first put in are maybe 3 or 4 more little lines. I'll do it again on the other side. Is this too small for you to see what I'm doing, or?
Well, no, I think I'm okay.
Okay. So on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come down with 1, 2, 3 short little strokes to make a curve going down. And then on top of that, near the middle, I'm going to put a couple short ones and then a couple longer ones right on top of that curve.
Okay.
There's a lot of ways to do this. You'll come up with your own way that probably works better for you, but these are a kind of a nightmare for most beginning painters. They just don't like these trees. So now the next one I'm going to do is going to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to come out a little longer with 3 little strokes, and then near the middle, put a couple of strokes, and then on the top of that curve, 1 or 2 or 3 more little strokes. The other side, 1, 2, 3 little strokes. And then on top of that curve, a couple more little wispy lines. You want to fill in the middle of the tree where the trunk is, but you want to leave these spacing between the outside ends of the branches. You don't, otherwise you're going to end up with just a big solid triangle if you don't leave these spacing at the end of these.
Yeah.
So
I think mine
Yep.
looks like a bottle brush tree.
Well, that's okay. You can do some more filling in if you need to. I know it's a hard technique, but you'll develop your own little way of doing it. I've just done so many of them. Next one's going to be a little longer. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 little strokes, and then a couple little strokes above that, and 1 in the middle. The other side, 3 little strokes, little lines, I should say, that make a curve. And then a couple more on top of that. And you continue down. Each time it gets just a hair longer, not much, just a little bit longer, or further away from the center, I should say. 3 little lines there, and then 3 or 4, it doesn't matter, it's not rocket science. Put in a few little extras. Coming down with a few little curved lines, and then on top of that, a few little short lines. You kind of press down with the brush and then lift it up as you sweep upwards with the curves. Press down and lift up.
Okay.
You know, just kind of a press and lift. Don't worry if it doesn't work out the first time. They're hard. This is really one of the hardest things to paint, to look realistic. And there's other ways of doing it. I've tried so hard to come up with a way that's easy to understand what I'm doing.
Yeah.
As you know, you can watch me do it, and it looks, when you go to do it, it doesn't work out as well. I know my first trees were nothing to be proud of. So a few little wisps. I think this technique is turning out to be the best one I've used in the past, other than in the past. This seems to work the best for people. And then finish off right on the snow. And also don't worry too much about the realistic look of it, because we're putting some white paint on top afterwards to look like snow.
Uh-huh.
So you can fill in spots that you don't like as much with the white paint and just make little clumps of snow on the branches.
Okay.
So that'll help a lot too. If you end up with something that you don't like, just put some snow on it.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Let's use the Payne's Gray again. This time only Payne's Gray. This space I'm filling in is kind of an in-between large and small, I would say. And this is the foundation under the right side of the building.
All right.
All to the right of the wheel and under the fence. And then over to the snow, that foundation area.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to wet it first because I want a soft edge. The right-hand side of it is actually in shadow. So I want a soft edge. So that's the other thing about wetting and painting on wet or dry paper. When you want soft edges, you paint on wet paper. When you want a
Okay.
hard, sharp, crisp edge, you paint it on dry paper. So I'm just going to wet underneath on the foundation with clean water, under the little fence on the building, and over into that little, there's a little bit of the foundation showing beside the snowbank. And that is all painted in Payne's Gray, but it's lighter on the front. So make it, because there's some like cement blocks that are going to be, we're going to put lines in this lighter side. So keep this front side pretty light. Just drop in a little Payne's Gray and maneuver it around so that it stays pretty light. And then come in with a darker Payne's Gray, which means not as much water mixed with it, more paint, and
Uh-huh.
shadow the very far right-hand side with a darker mix right beside the snow and under the fence. And it will blur where it meets the other wet front that you just did, but that's okay. We want just a kind of a irregular soft edge there for the shadow. It's a soft edge shadow. So you should have two values there in the Payne's Gray, light on the front side and darker on the shadowed side, which is right beside the snowbank. And that's just Payne's Gray by itself. Okay, did you get that?
Okay. Yeah.
Yep, okay. We're gonna skip the wheel right now because if we paint that, it's gonna run into the foundation because that's still wet, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna paint in the stone wall that's one in front of the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
The other one goes behind the tree,
Yes.
okay? To move this a little bit better. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's raw sienna?
It is raw sienna. This one you can do either way. You can paint it on dry paper or you can wet it first, whatever you like. I like the technique where you wet it and drop in the color, but it can be done on dry paper. I'm gonna do it on dry paper right now. You want to use, you're doing the 2 stone areas first, below the wheel. The only one disadvantage to painting it directly on dry paper is that you can come up with it a little too dark. You got to be careful about how much paint you put down. If you do, you can, if it's too dark, you can blot it. And also remember that watercolor dries about 40% lighter than what you put on. 30 to 40% lighter. So you
Now,
do want.
why does yours look so yellow? Yours looks lemony and mine looks like baby
yeah.
poop. I have the right color though, because it says raw sienna.
Sienna?
Yeah.
Raw sienna?
Yeah.
I don't know. You might have a different brand of paint than I do.
Okay, I have that Academy one you told me to
Oh.
get. Yeah.
Raw sienna? Oh, that should be okay. If you want to add a little bit of cadmium yellow to it, you can brighten it up that way.
Okay. Well, no, I like the color. I just wanted to make sure it was okay because it looks different than what I can see on your screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I
yeah,
think it's a pretty color. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That should be a good raw sienna.
Okay. And what I was supposed to water it down to make it lighter.
Right. And then do the other stone edifice that's under the wheel. And don't forget there's a little mound of snow on top of the piece, the
Okay.
wall that's under the wheel. There's a little
Yeah.
mound of snow on the top of that. So don't paint that. If you did happen to do anything that paint something that was supposed to be white, you can come in with the white Chinese white or white gouache later and just paint white, put white paint on top of something. If you lose any of the whites that you needed to reserve. And also the top of the, above the wheel, that little, I guess it's a trough that goes across to hold where the water goes through. That needs to be raw sienna as well. Right across the top of those lattice places and right down to the end. That's also raw sienna. Okay, doing all right?
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want to rush you, so.
That backside too. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna move over to the building now. And the front of the building, or the main part of the building under the peak roof is burnt umber. Just burnt umber by itself. So you're gonna take a little off your palette and mix it on with a little bit of water. And it's about a medium value. You don't want to go too dark with it because you've got to put windows on top that will show up. The windows are Payne's gray, so it's not a real problem to get them to show up, but you don't want to do this brown too dark. And I think I will wet it first with just water and go under the peak and right over the windows. And just get some water, just this front section. The rest of the building on the right is another color. So just this front under the peak roof is the burnt umber. So I've wet it and I have ended up with some color in my wash, but that's okay. Can see better where you've gone. So, and then I'm going to drop in a little more, a little too much. Get a little more, put a little more on my paper and then spread out because I had a good amount. So I'm going to just spread out what I had on there. And I'm going to need a little bit more. Kind of messy. And then down around the wheel, it goes brown. And into, it's like a medium value. You should faintly see your pencil lines. If you can't see the pencil lines for the windows, then you're too dark.
Okay. Yeah. I can see the pencil line, but everything looks orangey to me, but it looks pretty brown on yours. So I don't know if it's just the lighting because of the computer.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
It should be a good brown. It does have, the burnt umber does have a slight red tinge to it.
Yeah.
So that might be what you're seeing, but
You said burnt umber?
yes.
I know what's wrong. I did burnt sienna. That's why it's orange.
Well, burnt sienna
It's
goes
orange.
on the other side, but you can just flip it around if you want. You can either try to lift that off and put burnt umber down, or you can do the opposite of the painting and leave the burnt sienna on that front and do burnt umber on the other side.
It lifted
long as
off
you have a
really well because I had
difference.
enough water. Okay. But I'm
As
glad
long
I said something.
Oh, that's why it's orangey, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to leave it that way and do the
I
burnt?
lifted it off with a paper towel.
Oh, okay. So
I'll
go ahead with the
and
burnt.
Yeah, that's nicer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All set. Looks good now.
Oh, good. Okay, while that's drying, let's do the wheel, and that's cadmium red. And if you want to make it a little bit more rustier looking, you can add a little bit of burnt sienna. If it seems to be too pinkish for what you like. Some of the cadmiums are a little more on the pink side. Some are a little more on the orange side.
Yeah, right now it looks like Betty Boop's lipstick.
Oh, okay. So add a little bit of burnt sienna to it
Okay.
and make it more of a rusty red. Yeah, mine was really pink. All different brands of paint have different colors, different shades, I should say. So the wheel just gets painted directly on the paper, the spokes, the center axle, and all the way around the outside. Painted in the red. Skip that little
White
straight
bar. Yeah.
bar, yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be just a little touch of brown. Don't forget to go above that little bit of snow on the stone area. And that's pretty much that. Got that?
I do.
Okay. Let's go over back to the building. And this time you are going to use burnt sienna for the rest of the building. I'm going to wet it first. One thing I'm going to do is drop in a little bit of burnt umber on the very far right lower side. And so I want to do that on damp paper. So we're going to wet all the way down over the fence, over the doors. Some of this is done later with white paint.
All of it. Tell your brother or your father when they get home. Thank you.
So just a little bit of water to dampen the paper. Not too puddly.
Yeah, I seem to be heavy-handed with the water.
Oh, yeah, you'll get used to that. So that's wet. We're going to take burnt sienna and drop that in. Much redder, more orange. It's almost orange, really. Don't forget it's going to dry lighter. So should be a pretty good medium value. I'm darkening mine a little bit more. All the way over, finish the side with burnt sienna. And then on the side, We're gonna put a little burnt umber on the lower right-hand side of this, where I'm painting right now. On the lower edge of that, I'm gonna take burnt umber. What, just a little tiny brush. Tiny brush so you don't unload too much color. That's another key to how much paint you need to put on your paper. A smaller brush won't unload as much color, so it won't burst, you know, and run all over the place. So this is not a very big area where I want the burnt umber. So I'm using a very small brush and just putting it on the edge and on the lower, just the lower corner, really.
Yeah, and you didn't go all the way to the roof line?
Not with the burnt umber.
Okay.
With the burnt sienna, yes.
Yes, I was just making sure because it didn't look like you did. Okay, good.
No, burnt umber's just that lower corner. A little higher on the side, a little lower on the bottom edge.
Okay.
You can take a little touch of the burnt umber and add it up in on the other little, on the front if you want to. If you want a little touch of something, make it a little more variety, you can put in a couple little lines of burnt umber. And when it dries, they'll kind of blend together and just give you some variety of color. Not too much, but I think I overdid it a little bit. I'm gonna put a little more burnt sienna in there. If you overdo it with the burnt umber, you can add more burnt sienna later, even after it dries. So yeah, so that's the side. That's really as far as we got in the class, but
Okay.
something happened with the computer and they didn't see me at the end. So I just explained, I'm going to show you, but I just
Okay.
explained how to do these trees in the background,
Uh-huh.
all the stick trees.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a few of those, and then I'm going to leave that up to you to work on your own.
Okay.
Most likely everybody's going to be at that stage where they've done all the stick trees on their own. I explained how to do it, and I'm not going to take the class time just to have you sit there and make lots of lines that are almost all, you know, the same and kind of tedious and boring. It'll take a long time to fill up all that area with stick trees. But it's the same.
Yeah, you're doing that all with burnt umber right now?
Burnt umber and the Payne's gray. So it's the same color that you have down there right now. A little bit of a grayish brown. And I'm starting with some light value. Right now I have a small brush, a 0, I think it is. And I'm going to start on the left of the big tree. And hold your brush straight, really vertical, so you can get right up on the tip of it to get a really fine line. And you can see how small my brush is. I'm going to start on the line and pull upwards, branch off of that. If your hand's shaky, it usually works well. So I'm going to just keep on building up lots of these lines. It's a little dark. These are a little bit darker than I wanted. I want to get layers, basically. Some very light ones, and then as I keep going, I'll be getting darker and darker. So it gives it the sense of depth. So as we start out here, we want them, that's a little bit better, fairly light. Slant them a little bit, branch off into like a 45-degree angle somewhat. Some of the branches can branch off lower than others. But this is going to take a while. So the basic technique for it is that you do light ones and then you get darker. wide, some a little wider than others. And when you finally get to the end and you're on the very darkest value, well, the medium to dark value, you want to, do you have a liner brush? The one
Yes.
okay, that's going to be your key to getting thin branches at towards the end of all this. After you've put in a lot of these with a small round brush,
Mm-hmm.
after you've branched off a few times from the trunks, then you're going to come in with a liner brush and put in lots and lots of crisscrossing thin branches.
Okay.
Okay. So at the same time, what you're doing is getting darker in value and getting thinner lines as you go along. Most of the heavier trunks are done with the round, small round brush, and then the thinner branches are done with the liner brush. But it's going to take a long time to get a variety of thick and thin. Just keep building it up. And as you can see, it's going to take a long time to close up that space with lots and lots of crisscrossing branches. You can look at the color reference.
Yeah. And you're gonna do that all the way across, just like it looks in the picture, even
Yes.
behind your Christmas tree. Yeah.
Yep. You're going to come in. I'll show you what. Just start at the tree. Don't try to go from the top down, because then you won't be able to stop as well. So start at the tree and work upwards and just kind of tuck them in between the green. You might have to just stick a couple in between the green branches.
Okay.
Just short little lines just to fill in. So it looks like they're going behind the green tree.
Right.
You don't want to make it so that they're just falling around the top of the tree. You want to go in between like this, in between some of the green branches with some little lines so that they look like they're behind the green tree. But it'll take a while. Take your time with it, and it's best if you're really careful and take your time with it.
Okay.
Then the rest of it, oh, the little stones. We did start the little stone outlines on the yellow areas, the raw sienna.
Uh-huh.
We took burnt umber, and I'll show you on a bigger piece of paper. I'm going to do this larger so you can get the idea of how I laid out the stones. They're so tiny. You want to make them really, really tiny. But the idea is that they have like rounded edges and come down. And then a rounded edge. I mean, this is probably 500 times the size you want.
Right.
Rounded like that.
Okay.
And then the next row, it's like laying bricks.
Yeah.
Kind of alternate and put one in between there. Some can be bigger than others, but for the most part, they're, does that make sense? The way they
Yeah.
kind of stack like bricks,
Right.
but tiny, the very smallest brush that you have, and come in here and just make tiny little, don't have too much water on your brush because
Okay.
it'll make the line too thick. So fairly dry brush, and just little indications of breaks between the crevices between, that's what you're putting in, is like the crevices between the stones.
Uh-huh.
So I'm gonna just put little. So that was one other thing that they started in class, but they're gonna finish on their own.
Okay. Okay, good. So then I'll do
Okay.
the trees and the brick and I'll be good for Thursday.
Right, yep, that's all we did Thursday. So you're right up to the rest of the class.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this for me.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, then. We will clean up and have a good night.
Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay.